This girl is studying at a very popular university in our country. This university is very big. She needs to take a bus to school. In order to be on time for class, there is basically a bus at any time. One night, she studied very late and waited for the bus on the way back to the dormitory. Because basically not many people study until late, so she sat alone in the bus. She sat in the seat of the bus and then the car started to start. Everything went well until a few minutes later. She noticed that the driver was staring at her very nervously through the rearview mirror. She felt very uncomfortable. In order not to look at the driver's eyes, she quietly turned her head. After a while, she looked at the driver again to see if he was still staring at her. What surprised her was that the driver was still staring at her. The girl thought that since she was driving, she should take turns looking at the road and her. But the way she looked was too scary. It looked like she was staring at him all the time. Then her eyes opened from the driver's seat. The student only looked at the scenery outside. When she was about to reach the destination, she noticed that the driver was not driving towards the dormitory. She was very scared but still tried to be calm. She told the driver, "Master, this is not the place in my dormitory." At this time, the driver no longer looked at her but focused his attention on the car. She noticed her facial expression. She didn't seem to hear her, and she looked very scared. At this time, the driver was driving faster and faster. He was very scared. She tried to tell him again, "Master, this is not the route to my dormitory." The driver still didn't notice her. It seemed that she couldn't even hear him. He almost gave up. She felt that something bad might happen to her. She was ready to scream for help. Or if the driver drove a little slower, she would jump out of the car and run away. But after driving for nearly 5 minutes, the driver drove to the route to her dormitory. When she saw her dormitory from afar, her heart finally calmed down. Then the driver stopped in front of her dormitory. He got off the car at the fastest speed. He rushed to the door. At this time, the driver stopped her and said something to her. "When you go back to your room, change the clothes you are wearing now, burn them or throw them away. I saw you without a head in the mirror before. It must be the evil spirit who wants to catch you. So I tried to go around the circle to turn the evil spirit out. Next time I have to be extra careful." When she heard this news, she was very shocked. She couldn't believe what the driver said. She went back to her room, woke up her roommate, told him everything. Then she listened to the driver's advice and threw away her clothes. She was very grateful for everything the driver did. But this experience has always been in her heart. November 14, 1995. Late at night, the cold wind was blowing. The bus number 375 from Beijing slowly departed from the main station of Yuanmingyuan. This was the last bus on that day. Because it was too late, there were not many passengers on the way. There were only a driver and a ticket collector in the bus. The bus drove all the way to the south station of Yuanmingyuan, and only 4 people came up from below. They were a young couple, a young man and an old man. After getting on the bus, the young couple sat closely behind the driver in a double-decker seat. The young man and the old man sat in the single-decker seat next to the door one by one. The final destination of this bus was Xiangshan. It was quite remote on the road and there was no one on the bus. And it was very quiet in the bus, which made the atmosphere more heavy. After about 2 stops, the driver suddenly yelled loudly. Everyone in the bus was shocked by his voice, and they looked in the direction of the driver. There was a black shadow waving here about 10 kilometers ahead. The driver yelled loudly because he was blocking in the middle of the road and he almost hit him. After a few words, the driver still parked the car on the side of the road. After all, it was a wilderness and this was the last bus. If he didn't care about them, he would have been frozen to death here. The driver didn't expect that this action would hurt himself. As soon as the bus stopped, 3 people came up. They were all wearing heavy military uniforms. They were all covered in smoke and they were wearing sunglasses in the middle of the night. They couldn't see their faces clearly. The middle man was holding his head and the 2 people on the left and right were holding him. It was like getting drunk. After 3 people got on the bus, they sat in the last row. They didn't say a word during the period. The bus was back to the dead silence. After a while, the old man in the back seat suddenly stood up. The young man in front of him yelled that he had stolen his wallet. The young man didn't know what was going on. He hadn't moved since he got on the bus. He didn't have time to steal his stuff. He explained to the old man in a loud voice, but the old man didn't listen. He pulled his hand and said he wanted to call the police, but the police stated that the driver had to stop the car immediately. He knew there was a police station nearby. The young man got angry. He got off the bus with the old man. After getting off the bus, the young man wanted to argue with the old man, but the old man was staring at the road. Until the bus driver opened his eyes, he sighed. Then he said to the young man, "I just saved your life." The young man was a little confused. The old man explained, "Do you remember the 3 people in the back seat? I noticed it when they just got on the bus. They had no shadow." At first, the old man thought it was caused by the poor light in the car, but he didn't pay much attention to them. And just now there was a gust of wind outside the window. The old man saw the man on the left and the man on the right had no legs at all. His pants were empty. He was floating in the wind. As for the man in the middle, he had been on the bus for so long. He had no reaction. He didn't even breathe. He must not be alive. The 2 people next to him are even worse. It's a ghost guess. The young man opened his eyes. He looked at the old man with a frightened face. He couldn't speak for a long time. The old man reminded him to call the police, but he didn't. In fact, if you were a cop and someone told you this story in the middle of the night, you wouldn't pay attention to him. But the next day, the bus company came to report the case again. They said there was a driver and a ticket collector missing. This made the police pay attention. They searched along the 375 route for a day. They didn't find anything. Finally, a crowd of people reported the case. They said they found this bus near the water reservoir. At that time, there was no living person on the bus. There were only 4 highly decayed corpses. The clothes were the ticket collectors, the drivers, and the couples. It's almost impossible, because even in the summer, the corpse would never appear in such a short time with such a severe decay. It takes at least a month to do this. What is strange to the old man is that the major surveillance cameras along the way did not capture the bus on the 375 route. It's like it appeared here out of nowhere. Even if it came through a small road without surveillance, the water reservoir is more than 100 kilometers away from the mountain. The oil of the bus was mixed. It's impossible to drive here. The police opened the fuel tank of the bus. They found that it was not gasoline. It was a black and red sticky liquid. It smelled fishy. Okay, turn on the light. Next, let's go into science. The 375 bus has been circulating on the internet for a long time. It was even rated as one of the 10 most dangerous incidents in China. But it's fake. First of all, the 375 bus in Beijing doesn't go through Xiangshan at all. In 1995, only the 333 bus went through Xiangshan. But its starting point is Yihiyuan, not Yuanminjiuan. Second, it's such a big thing. But in 1995, it was never reported. It was not even mentioned. The earliest story came from the World Forum. It was about 2002. Many people think that the origin of this story is a car called Mobin in Zhang Zhenjiang's story. But it's not. Its origin is a Taiwan program broadcasted in 1994, Rose Night. There is a link called The Ghost Story. They will invite passers-by to tell various stories and urban legends. This is also the earliest ghost story in the bus appeared in front of us. This is something that happened to me when I was 18 years old. At that time, I went to the gym every afternoon. Then I took a public bus home. It was Sunday that day. I was discussing something with my coach. I missed the public bus at 9 o'clock, so I had to wait for the next one. I wanted to call my parents, but they weren't home at night. The taxi was expensive, so I decided to sit in the back of the car. It was a cold night. The blood was just starting to spill on the ground. Because it was night, there were fewer buses. So I took out my phone and played a short video of the Midnight Theater. This blogger was so interesting. I paid close attention to him. It's been almost an hour. It was very cold. I didn't see anyone until I noticed a man from the corner of my eye. He was wearing thick clothes. He looked like a scary guy. He slowly walked towards me. I was a little scared. I dared to lower my head. I didn't dare to look at him. He sat on the other end of the bench. He stared at me. He was a little weird. He was either drunk or drugged. He suddenly asked me why I hadn't come home yet. I was a little scared, but I still told him. Because of the snow, he didn't catch the bus. He stared at me for a while. Then he started to talk to himself. I was a little scared when I saw him talking to himself. I started to pretend to make a phone call. I hope this can scare him away. But he was still getting a little closer to me. He stared at my handsome face. Then he suddenly got up. He raised his arms and rushed towards me. I grabbed my bag and ran. I saw him fall to the ground, but I still didn't dare to stop. I kept running until I got to the next bus stop. I sat on the bench. I sat on the glass and waited for the bus. When I was waiting for the bus, the glass behind me suddenly made a noise. I was scared. I turned around and found that the person was staring at me through the glass. I asked him why he was following me. He didn't answer me. He just slowly walked towards me. I screamed. When I turned around, I wanted to run, but I left my bag on the bench. There was something that the coach and I guarded together. Without him, I couldn't leave. Suddenly, someone came to me. I ran away quickly. I was scared. Then I noticed blood running down his face. I tried to wake him up, but I didn't get any response. I could only call the police and the medical staff. I told him what happened here. They'll be here soon. They told me that the person was drugged. He was in a state of mental confusion. They found a picture of him and his son in his wallet. The boy looked like me, so we thought he mistook me for his son. Later I found out that he lost his only son. From then on, he was taken away for treatment. That was the last time I saw him. Since then, I have never taken a bus again.